Use a knife to make a small cut on the forehead. Then use scissors to break the skin of the flesh, not to break it. Then, following the pattern in the book, 3 red moles are dotted on the forehead. After tattooing, cover it lightly with powder to lighten it. Then use a fishhook to sew the skin back together. The woman is very nervous. She mustn't leave any traces. If there is any trace, the whole clan will die. The maid hurriedly increased her speed. Before the anesthesia burns out, the woman was able to close the wound completely. At that moment, the king had just opened his eyes. He didn't notice anything strange, and 3 moles had been dotted on his forehead for no apparent reason. The face reader risked the death of all his family to perform this operation, in order to let the emperor know His Majesty is plotting against the emperor, because in the ancient book of physiognomy, a man with 3 moles on his forehead must be a rebel. The next day, King Yen went to see the emperor. Through the light of the high beam, the emperor saw the 3 moles clearly. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. He summoned the best face reader in China to discuss how to get rid of this scourge. But no one expected this was all a well-planned conspiracy by the face reader, because a few years ago, the old emperor was afraid that King Yen would rebel. He asked the face reader to read the king's face, so he disguised himself as a trusted advisor and came to Yan's residence. But when he saw the king, he laughed out loud. The man was hunched over, his eyes were slack, and his nose twitched from time to time. He looked like a flat king with no ambition at all, so he happily told the emperor not to worry about his death. King Yen wouldn't rebel. Sure enough, the emperor was relieved to leave within a few days. Soon after, the king of Yen came for a feast. When the face reader saw his face, he was stunned. He was dressed in black with a murderous look. Not only did he have a pair of eagle eyes, his eyes were especially sharp. This is the face of a traitor. It was only then that Lao Jin realized that he had fallen into their trap. That the face reader puts a melon on a woman's nose. Only those with moles on their noses will be rich and famous. As expected, it didn't take long. The woman became a rich man. As Lao Jin was always very accurate in his readings, he soon became the #1 face reader among the people. Many dignitaries came to see him. Even the police would come to him for advice. A woman was murdered. The court caught 3 suspects, but they couldn't tell who the murderer was, so they invited Lao Jin here. When he took a look at the victim's face, he immediately asked the court to release the suspects, and pointed out that the murderer was the husband of the deceased. He was identified on the spot. The husband was shocked, and Lao Jin gave enough reasons. The husband and wife are the faces of a weasel and a chicken. They shouldn't have gotten together in the first place. Otherwise, one of them would have been killed or injured. Lao Jin's words stunned everyone. The husband didn't realize that his elaborate plot was discovered by a physiognomist. He was rewarded with a large sum of money. The prime minister knew about it. The prime minister recognized his talent. He gave him the title of inspector. He asked him to use his book to help him catch corrupt officials, and Lao Jin didn't let him down. In 3 to 5 days, a large number of corrupt officials were found. Some of them appeared to be clean and simple, but Kim could see right through them all. He's the best physiognomist in Joseon. Even the emperor summoned him. But what Kim didn't expect, before he could speak, the emperor was furious and accused him. He caused panic among the court officials with his sorcery. Jin was so scared that he didn't dare to make a move. Luckily, the emperor only suppressed him. He didn't actually punish him. Lao Jin was so scared when he returned home. He couldn't help but sigh that it's like being in the company of a tiger. But just then, a group of people came to see him. Lao Jin wanted to refuse him, but when he saw the people at the back of the queue, he couldn't help but tremble. He quickly ran out and fell on his knees. At this moment, the emperor also made his intentions clear. Now someone in Joseon wants to rebel and take over the throne. He wanted Jin to use his face reading skills to help him find the person with the face of a rebel. So Jin came up with a plan. He asked the emperor to send a pair of famous paintings to each of them. He used the opportunity to go to their homes to observe their faces, because people are most at ease in familiar surroundings. It's also the easiest to see a person's face. But after checking them out, Lao Jin didn't see that they had any intention to rebel. Only one person remains. The king of Yen is the one the emperor is most worried about. He's a powerful man with a large army. But when Lao Jin first met him, he realized that he was just a villain. Not only did he have no will to fight, he's also full of problems. How could such a man usurp power? He reported to the emperor early the next morning. He said it was impossible for the king of Yen to usurp the throne, but the emperor was still worried. He's very sick. His days are numbered. When he passed away, the young prince won't be able to control the government. He couldn't even survive. It wasn't long before the emperor died, but before he died, he gave a secret order to Lao Jin. He wanted him to take care of the young prince. The next day, the prime minister approached him about the king of Yen. His words revealed his fear of the king of Yen. He's definitely a man with a wolf's ambition. But Lao Jin couldn't understand why everyone is worried that the king of Yen will usurp the throne. The last time he looked at his face, King Yen is a complete villain. But the prime minister called him stupid. Anyone who doesn't know how to read faces can see the king's ambition. While they were discussing, King Yen has arrived at the door. Looking at the group of people coming towards him, Lao Jin finally realized that he had been tricked. The man in front of him is the real king of Yen. This is a cruel wolf. The face of rebellion and usurpation of power is too obvious. In order to get rid of the king before he revolts, Lao Jin and the chancellor discussed this with the young emperor. But the young emperor is simple-minded. He didn't believe his uncle would try to kill him. When they didn't know what to do, Jin happened to know that the emperor liked to read face-reading books. So a plan came to his mind. It is written in the book of physiognomy. 3 moles on the brow are the signs of a traitor. So Lao Jin set up a trap. He pretended to be a doctor to treat the king of Yen. He used the opportunity to dot 3 moles on his forehead to create the face of a rebel, so as to confuse the young prince who had studied physiognomy. The young prince was shocked. He went to the prime minister and ordered the king's exile. That night, the prime minister gathered all his inner circle. He agreed on a plan of action to execute the king, and Lao Jin was confident. This time, he he would be able to solve the problem of the king of Yen. But what he didn't expect was, his own son was in trouble. He had just reported his boss. He was blinded in retaliation the same night. When my brother-in-law found out the prime minister was involved, he was angry and regretful at the same time, because Jin knew his son's career was in danger. He never allowed him to take the imperial examination to become an official, but his brother-in-law secretly raised money to buy books for him to study. As a result, his nephew really did succeed in the scholarship, but now he is full of regret. He blamed the prime minister's residence for everything. So my brother-in-law went straight to King Yan's residence. He told him all about the conspiracy between the prince and the prime minister to arrest him. He hoped King Yan would kill the prime minister to avenge his nephew's death. The king made a promise. He promised to make his family rich and famous. When Lao Jin found out about this, he beat up his brother-in-law. He said if the prime minister died, he said if the chancellor died, they would die too. Jin shouldn't have let his brother-in-law know too much. At this moment, he is full of regrets, but he still has a glimmer of hope. He rushed to the chancellor to inform him of this. He hoped he could escape the king of Yan's pursuit, but he was too late. Lao Jin desperately ran to the palace for help, but he never realized King Yan's territory had already been turned into his own. He has completely rebelled. The young prince sat on the throne and cried but could do nothing about it. He could only watch as his loyal subjects were slaughtered to death. The next day, a group of officials who refused to give in were taken out of the palace, and Lao Jin saw his son. He went to his knees and begged the king to release his son, but the king of Yen teasingly asked him if he had the face of an emperor. In order to save his son. He said he would be a saintly king for generations to come. The king of Yen was happy to hear that. He decided to release his son, but the father and son had just taken a few steps. The king of Yen said he wanted to give him a reward for his face reading. He took Mapei's bow and arrow. He shot his son next to Lao Jin, although Lao Jin could read people's faces at a glance, but he couldn't see his own destiny. In the end, he had to send his son away.